Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Buckeye Weekly Podcast. I am Tony Gerdeman, here as always with Tom Orr. Tom, how's it going?
Tony, there's only a little over a week and a half left before we have an actual football game to cover. We were sitting at Ohio State on Monday, and it sort of came up like, yeah, Ohio State's about to start game prep for Notre Dame. It's like, that's pretty early, because that game's still only like a week away. Wow, that's pretty soon. And Tony, if you are the type of person who likes football, I think that's good news.
And Tom, if you are the type of person who likes Ohio State football, we have good news for you at BuckeyeHuddle.com, where you should join and partake in the team coverage, the recruiting coverage, the X's and O's that we have, and also the vibrant. And as I declared it on Twitter Monday evening, an inviting community. A lot of these communities, Tom, very divisive, very angry. We are inviting, and we're there. We're all there talking football, talking Ohio State football, talking Game of Thrones. You know, all kinds of very relevant things. So I would advise, check it out if you're not yet a member. Give it a month, see what you think. Hey, give it a year. See what you think. And now is the perfect time because you'll get 3 games of coverage, and then you get to decide, do I want to stick around for the Wisconsin game? Yes, you will want to stick around for the Wisconsin game and the build up there as well. So give it a check. Give it a go. Check it out, BuckeyeHuddle.com. And if you're watching this on YouTube and you have not yet subscribed, please do so to the channel, to the Buckeye Huddle channel. Hit the bell, get notified when we go live. Tom, I think that is most of the bells and whistles that I had to throw out there. Anything else?
I think that's all the ads we need to do, all the plugs we need to do. Yes, you should join BuckeyeHuddle.com because it is a really fun community, very active board for a site that only launched less than a week ago. It is already an extremely active and very fun community. So. Yes, and we have some very big and very fun and exciting stuff planned. We had a meeting after we went to Ohio State on Monday and started talking game day plans. And man, I am pretty excited for some of the stuff that's coming. So you'll want to check that out at BuckeyeHuddle.com.
Yeah, when we start planning things and then are talking about a dry run, and it's like, well, we got to do that pretty soon because the season is right here. But so on Monday, we talked with Ryan Day and Jim Knowles, so I thought we would just go ahead and go over everything we learned today. Got some injury updates. Kam Babb will be out a few weeks. Not a season-long thing like some people feared, but he will be held back a little, and they're going to be super cautious with him because of his injury history. So probably won't see him against Notre Dame, but probably a good time to work him in, maybe like the Toledo game, something like that, where the game should be no longer in doubt once the kickoff happens, basically. But I think more concerning or some good news is Ryan Day saying that the corners should be back at full strength by the Notre Dame game. Now, when Jim Knowles was asked about Jordan Hancock being back for Notre Dame or being good to go, he said that was above his pay grade, but did say it was good to have almost everybody back at corner practicing. I'm kind of getting mixed signals. Do you believe Ryan Day? This might be some Bill Belichick, some NFL, no, we're going to be fine type of stuff.
Well, I mean, if you have most of your guys back, if you have 5 of your 6 scholarship guys back, and the 6th one is going to be a game time decision, you'd feel like you've pretty much got everyone back. And you're still a week and a half out, and if you are to the point where that's going to be a game time decision, okay, you're not going to rush it, and you're also probably not going to know right now. He is definitely 10 and a half days away from being able to play, so it may be a little bit in that kind of gray area. So I would not necessarily automatically chalk that up to Ryan Day as being deceptive or anything like that. Ryan Day has not typically been overly willing to share anything injury-wise, so I kind of take everything with a little bit of a grain of salt, but I don't think, I think you're probably not going to have 6 guys who are absolutely 100% going to play at that corner position in that game. But, it certainly seems like there's been substantial progress on that front, which is, and the way Jim Knowles was talking about it, boy, Jim Knowles is feeling pretty good about life right now.
Yeah, and we will get to that. But some of the guys stepping up, as we've talked about recently, Jair Brown, the true freshman, J.K. Johnson, the redshirt freshman, have both had a ton of opportunities in camp because they had the pitch count for Kam Brown. So as long as you've got Denzel Burke and you've got Kam Brown, and both of those guys have missed some reps in camp, and it's been Jair Brown, J.K. Johnson getting a lot of those and improving. So, they have 6 scholarship corners. Jair Brown, J.K. Johnson have elevated, I think, the depth a little bit. And I don't know that they expected Jair Brown to be this good this early. Not that he's going to start or anything, but I think it was Jim Knowles or Ryan Day saying that he's getting close to being game ready and a guy that they can turn to if need be. And I don't know if they would have thought that or expected that even a month ago. So I think that's a really good sign for the defense. One other injury area I want to talk about is Evan Pryor. Ryan Day was asked if they had to kind of rework what they were going to do with the running backs in terms of Evan Pryor. And Day was very impressed with Dallan Hayden and talked a bit about him.
Yeah, Dallan Hayden sounds like, there is not much question who is number 3 in that pecking order behind Travion Henderson and Mayan Williams. And you feel like they're pretty comfortable with number 1 and number 2 on that list. Dallan Hayden sounds like he has very much secured that number 3 spot. They apparently have worked Chip Trayanum there at least one day. We're very impressed with what Chip Trayanum brings. But, we had talked about Chip Trayanum as, a potential option there a week ago when the Evan Pryor news kind of first broke. And I think that, they're looking at him and they go, okay, yes, he in fact can be a running back if we need him to, but I don't think they really want him to because, he's higher on the linebacker depth chart right now than he is at the running back depth chart. And if you can make it go with, you have the famous pair and a spare right now with the 3 guys. If Hayden is, indeed in the circle of trust and he has lost his black stripes, so you'd certainly think that he is. So you probably don't need Chip Trayanum over there. But if you do, you have the luxury of having a multi-year Power 5 running back on your roster, just in case you need to break glass in case of emergency. But yeah, Hayden, losing your black stripe when he did is like, okay, that's, for someone who was not there in the spring to have lost that black stripe in the matter of 3 weeks of fall camp, like that's pretty early for that to happen. So, and that's a place where we've seen them play young guys early. J.K. Dobbins played the first game of his career. He started at Indiana in 2017. You have seen, Maurice Clarett did that. You've seen other guys. Mike Weber started, I think, as a redshirt freshman, right? He was redshirt freshman. But you've seen, that's a spot where it's not outrageous to see a guy start as a true freshman. It's happened before. They're not looking at Dallan Hayden as a starter. But if he can contribute and be a, 50 carries this year, maybe more, I don't know, something in that neighborhood, okay, that's great that they then don't have to dip into their linebacker depth to solve the running back problem.
Yeah, when the question was posed to Ryan Day, what are you going to do? How do you replace Evan Pryor and what you had planned for him? Do you give more carries to Travion and Mayan Williams? And Day answered, quite honestly, we have been very impressed with Dallan. He's got a lot of talent. He's our 3rd running back right now. If he continues to grow, then we're going to trust him and put him in the game. And so I do expect him to play, like you said, maybe 50 carries. We'll see. Certainly more of a need now, as you don't want to overwork the other guys late in games. But I don't know that I expect him for Notre Dame. But hey, maybe you're up by a couple touchdowns there in the end, and you want to go and just put somebody else in there. The Chip Trayanum thing, that's, as you explained, and I don't want people to make too much of this. They were just seeing if he still knew how to ride the bike. And he did. And so now you go back to defense, and we'll worry about the bike if we ever need to. So that's all that was. It's just making sure that if they need to, he's there, and don't make more of that than it needs to be. That's just my my statement on that. So I think the biggest takeaway, and that's the injury front. The biggest takeaway for me was talking with Jim Knowles. And when asked, hey, man, what's your biggest concern about the defense? And he's talking like, I don't know if I really have any. And then he goes on a little bit and he's like, since the corners are healthy and the corners are back, I don't know. And then he's like, I have no concerns. And I am now concerned, Tom. Like, does this, is Jim Knowles overconfident right now? Or is he just really happy with the depth, the talent, the range of players that he has right now?
Yeah, the exact quote was, I don't have that many concerns. Now that the corners are coming back, I feel confident in what we have. And, this is the time of year when coaches are trying to be optimistic, but they're also trying to not oversell, because the last thing you want to do is say, we have a national championship winning team, and then, have a team that, who wins 11 games and then loses in the college football playoff semifinal, which would be a successful season by just about any metric, unless you had set people up with the expectation that this is a national championship winning team. And that's true whether you're a Ohio State caliber team or a Nebraska caliber team, where there was a thread on our board at Buckeye Huddle about reasonable expectations for Nebraska and what are they going to do this year. Scott Frost is not going out there saying 10-win season, because then if they have a 7-win season, which would be 4 more wins than last year, well, it would still look like a real disappointment compared to the expectation of 10-win season. So coaches are generally not trying to really hype their teams up too much this time of year. So for Jim Knowles to come out and be asked directly, like, biggest concerns, and it's just kind of like, none. This is our first year with Jim Knowles, so, sometimes there are coaches who are just perpetual hype men and, can't stop talking up, every single player as a future All-American and a captain and, a future congressman and a future, National Honor Society member or whatever it is. We haven't been around Jim Knowles long enough to know if that's who he is, but I haven't really gotten the vibe off of him that that's who he is. So if he's feeling this optimistic that he's, feeling like, what is your problem? Like, no problems here. That, for the side of the ball that I think Ohio State fans would be concerned about, I think Ohio State fans are feeling pretty good about the offense, and it's like, well, if the defense can come together, it could be a pretty good season. If the side of the ball that you would have the questions about, the coordinator's going, yep, nope, no concerns here, that seems like a pretty good thing for Ohio State fans.
And Ryan Day is more confident as well, because he has a better understanding. They all have a better understanding of what their guys can do on defense. Last year, they were trying to figure it out on the fly because of all of these guys were so unproven. Your starting linebackers are Taraji Mitchell and Cody Simon and Tommy Eichenberg. All of these guys really never played before. And then Steele Chambers comes in and takes over, and the secondary had issues. Like, all of these guys were getting their feet wet at the wrong time. Now they're all experienced, and they know what guys are capable of. They know what guys are not capable of, probably more importantly. And so they're more reassured in what they can ask the guys to do and what they're able to do. And now you've got Jim Knowles installing his defense and trying to balance the newness, the learning of what his guys can do, like a Court Williams or a Lathan Ransom, who he could not speak more highly of today, where you're installing your own defense. He said he's got 75% of it installed now, and you won't get to 100%, but you've got that installed now. But then the more you learn about what your guys can do, I think he has to figure out this balance of, I really want to include Court Williams and Lathan Ransom, but also we don't want to get overloaded on stuff we want to do. Like, we got to get good at the core stuff and then go from there. But I don't know if he's going to be able to balance that in terms of all of these safeties, because he likes all of them. So I kind of expect him to find them ways to play. It may be a situation against Notre Dame where you see less Tanner McAllister and more Lathan Ransom and Court Williams.
Yeah, and Court Williams was someone that Knowles talked about, and he didn't start the question wasn't about Court Williams in particular, and then it turned into an answer about Court Williams, which is always interesting to me because, when you ask a coach like, hey, what have you seen out of JT Tuimoloau and Jack Sawyer, as you did today, okay, it's not a surprise when you get an answer about those two guys in particular. This was more of I think the question was kind of more about like, how is your personnel different at, now than in previous teams you've had, which, that kind of answer can go in a million different directions. He talked about how, normally it's not that hard to find a linebacker / defensive end kind of edge type hybrid player. That's something that he had at Oklahoma State. It's something you can find a lot of those guys. He talked about how finding the safety linebacker hybrid, what at Clemson they would call the Isaiah Simmons role, or at Ohio State, people looking 2 years down the line are thinking as the Sonny Styles role. He said, that if you can find that, that's much harder to find, and they have that in Court Williams, he thinks, and having someone like that who can play a couple roles and it kind of helps you disguise what you're doing, because you don't have 3 linebackers on the field. You don't have 3 safeties who are definitely safeties and only safeties. You don't have 3 of those on the field either. It's kind of like, well, what are they running? It's like, well, it depends. It depends on what he does on this play, because he can kind of do a little bit of everything. So that was interesting to me that was someone who Jim Knowles viewed as, kind of like a little bit of a secret weapon, and that's a term that they've used with Sonny Styles as well. But, kind of a secret weapon on defense where you could do a couple different things and, be a little bit deceptive to the offense as far as what you're planning to do.
I'm wondering if with our X's and O's guys like Ross and Devin and Justin, if they will agree with me here, where I'm trying to figure out like who plays when. Like Court Williams as that safety Sam is probably a Wisconsin-Michigan thing. Then you got Tanner McAllister as that nickel, which replaces the Sam. They don't play together. He's the guy that plays against the passing teams. Notre Dame kind of falls maybe in between there. And for me, maybe that's Lathan Ransom, where you got a guy that can cover better than Court Williams, can cover that tight end Michael Mayer, is also physical enough to hold up against the run. Some of the stuff that Jim Knowles was saying about Lathan Ransom, he's decisive. The quote is, he just goes. He's a football player. He can diagnose plays quickly, and then he's aggressive with how he treats it. Said he's had an exceptional camp. He's been the Silver Bullet of the day twice, and he stands out on the field and how he operates. And the quote is, he's usually never wrong. And so those are all like really, really strong words of a guy who Jim Knowles didn't expect necessarily to have him this year coming back from that injury, and certainly never got really a good look at what he can do. Probably had to go back and look at almost, like 2020 film when he's a true freshman and he's a completely different player. And so you just get your eyes opened by him in fall camp, and it's like, well, how do we not play this guy? And he keeps talking about this guy and this guy. And I'm like, is Josh Proctor still a thing? Yes, he is. But I think Jim Knowles just keeps finding guys that he likes. And then you ask him about the defensive line, and he's like, oh, let me tell you about these guys. But it sounds like I don't think he's blowing smoke, because obviously this is the most talented defense he's ever been around. And you can tell just from talking to him, like, he's got all of these gears turning, but also now is the time when they have to cut the defense back and prepare for Notre Dame.
Yeah, and, he talked about the playbook in terms of, you've got all these different tools, and you don't want to, you got to figure out which ones are going to work for different kind of circumstances. The players are kind of, the Lathan Ransom and all the different safety guys, the safety roles that they've got. That's kind of a bunch of tools, in the toolbox as well. And you got to kind of figure out which do you need for certain games. You mentioned earlier, he's got about 75% of that defense installed. He said he's like very comfortable with where they are right now, and actually further along than he would have expected. So now you're getting to the point where you've kind of, they've talked about it. He's, I think, gone through all the stuff in meetings. Now 75% of it has been installed on the field, and they've practiced it. Now you're to the point where, okay, you're not going to use 75% of your defense in the season opener against Notre Dame. Otherwise, you got all this stuff on film that teams can watch and learn from and then scheme against in the future. So now you're going to kind of pare it down. And here's the specific stuff we're going to use against Notre Dame. And, he said they're going to keep some good things in reserve for later in the season, because you have to have answers. You have to know okay, when, we're going to start doing this, and then they're going to answer it with, doing something else. And then we have to have what we do as the second response. That's kind of the cat and mouse game you see throughout the course of, first and second and third quarters of a football game. And it's also the cat and mouse game you kind of see throughout the course of the season as you put stuff on film, your opponents put stuff on film, and then you figure out what you're going to do against their stuff, and they figure out what they're going to do against your stuff. And you get the micro battles in the game and the macro battles kind of season wide. One thing that I really thought was funny that he talked about, he was asked, when are you going to have 100% of your defense installed? And he just basically said, never. You're never going to do it because you always want to hold stuff in reserve. He basically said, you always want to have stuff that not even the other coaches know about. Like, he just has stuff kind of like filed away, which, when you have, hypothetically, had he been at Ohio State last year and, he put 100% of the stuff out there in front of Ohio State linebackers coach Al Washington. Well, guess who's on the opposing sideline for game one this year? Notre Dame linebackers coach or defensive line coach Al Washington. So, he said you always kind of got to hold a little bit of stuff back. And, they're trying to be responsible with it because he said you don't want to just kind of like throw stuff at guys the week of the game. It's like, okay, it's Tuesday. We're just going to do a whole bunch of new crap this week for whatever team you're playing. So you can't do that. You got to kind of have it in, and then you're kind of bringing it back. It's like, oh yeah, remember we worked on this earlier. Now we're going to bring that out this week for Iowa, for Wisconsin, whatever it is in the middle of the season or the end of the season. So a lot of, he is just a very interesting guy to listen to talk about his defense, about scheme, all that kind of stuff. Cause he's not trying to be funny. He's not trying to be, like this, like huge character or anything like that. Ohio State's had, Jeff Hafley had a big personality. Kerry Combs had a big personality. I don't know that I would say Jim Knowles has a big personality, but he's just really interesting to listen to talk about defense and talk about football in general.
Yeah. And he's a guy that would, he sits there with a drink and a cigar and will talk football probably with any coach that wants to talk it. And I'm sure the conversations that him and Ryan Day have had back and forth have been very interesting. One of the things I liked about when talking about how much is going to be installed or not installing stuff during the week, he's like, you used to be able to do that because offenses were much simpler than they are now. And now offenses are so complicated, you can't really complicate yourself more that week. Like you got to be able to do what and you don't want to throw more stuff out there than they can handle. And so I thought that was interesting. Like, yeah, back in the day, you could add more stuff each week because offenses were so simple. And you face one offense, it's the same offense you're going to be facing, the next 4 weeks. College football, you're going to face Notre Dame. Next time, like you may not face the same offense, same style of offense, in consecutive weeks. So you have to be prepared for all of those things. And the only way to be prepared for all of those things is to do what you do very well and keep it specific and keep it simple. And then add in some, what does our defense do that suits Notre Dame well? And that's what they're working on right now. They will be playing fewer players. They're going to be rotating on the defensive line like crazy, but he doesn't want his back seven to rotate just to rotate. He said he wants them to get into get the feel of the game and get into a good rhythm and just build off of that and start to get the timing down of whatever the opponent is. And so that's going to be it sure makes sense compared to what happened last year when okay, now it's Tommy Eichenberg. Okay, now it's Cody Simon. You really never knew who was going to be playing or why somebody was playing last year. This year, you will know why, but also you can't be predictable because of that why.
And that's such an interesting balance to strike. And, you're one of the reasons you're rotating those defensive linemen so much is Larry Johnson wanting to keep guys fresh, and you feel like you've got guys who are sort of interchangeable. If you're rotating wide receivers, when Ohio State was going with the 6 wide receiver rotation a couple of years ago, we talked about how, if the other team's only playing 2 or 3 cornerbacks and you're playing 6 wide receivers, like by the end of the game, the other team's guys have run, 3 miles further than your wide receivers have, and you're going to have issues with just guys running out of gas at the end of the game. So it is an interesting balance to strike. He talked about, the defensive front and kind of the back seven almost kind of being independent in a way where you can do things differently on the front of the, the defensive front personnel wise than you do in the back seven. So yeah, I am going to be interested to see, is when he does, if he's not rotating corners, if they're not rotating corners a lot, is that because they don't feel they have corners they can trust? Or is that really a philosophical thing where he really just wants to keep, the top few guys on the field as much as possible? I think Denzel Burke and Cameron Brown, like you've seen enough from those guys to feel like they probably feel pretty good about them. And, Jordan Hancock, J.K. Johnson, those guys are coming along, and there's a lot to like there, but they're not as proven as the other guys. So it'll be interesting to see that how that all shakes out, and how much rotation do they really do at all these different position groups after the first game or two.
Yeah, I wonder if not rotation, but maybe they get the backups in there sooner in the secondary, because he talked about how he doesn't. The season-long concern that he's going to have at corner is because of the number of snaps, and so I would think one way to alleviate that would be to rotate if you can. If not, you better get the backups in there sooner than we've seen in the past, perhaps, and maybe that's where they steal some reps and save some guys and keep them fresh in November and things like that. Tom, I want to talk about the guy that everybody loves, Tommy Eichenberg. This guy, it's disgusting. It's so sickening the way that Ryan Day and Jim Knowles just cannot say enough good things about him. And it's not just, oh, he's really good, he's a nice kid. He's like, they're giving examples like Jim Knowles saying that he's never had a player pick up the defense as quickly as he has. I think that's pretty impressive, because you're talking about, he has coached at Cornell, he's coached at Duke. These are some pretty high academic places, and Tommy Eichenberg is, picking up the defense better than anybody before. The quote, his learning capacity, his ability to correct mistakes when he makes them, which is not often, is impressive. His pace of learning is fantastic. He processes quickly, reads his keys, and the importance there is the keys can change depending on what happens post-snap and all of these things, and he processes everything very quickly, and he's a serious guy, and he takes the game seriously, and that also reflects then in his teammates. And his quote was, he's not jacking around. And so when you've got a leader like that on defense, the quarterback of the defense, with that kind of attitude, with that kind of, he's very serious, he's very accountable, and corrects his mistake. When that's the example on the defense, I mean, that's exactly what you want.
Well, and how many times over the years, I remember talking to you in 2017 with the Greg Schiano defense, and how, they've got all these really great athletes out there, and they're still just playing so slow. Why are they playing so slow? And it's just, you could see the little pinwheel of death from a Mac computer just like spinning as guys are trying to figure out what's going on now? What's next? What am I supposed to do here? Because it's, the defense itself is pretty complicated, and that was slowing guys down. If you're able to process stuff very quickly, that means you're playing faster, you're attacking more, you're getting to the ball faster. That's all stuff that's going to make a huge difference for this team this year. You have to be able to play fast, and you want to have a defense that is simple enough that your guys can play fast, but also not so simple that the opposing team can go, well, here's what they're doing, so therefore we know how to beat it. That's, if you have guys who can take this is not the single most complicated defense in the world. I've talked to Ross Fulton about a bunch about this year, where, Knowles is trying to keep things somewhat simple so guys can play fast, but also disguising things to make it a little more complicated for the opponent. If you have guys, you have a relatively, a defense that is allowing guys to play fast, and you have people who are processing things quickly within that defense, that's just going to let you play even faster. And, that's, we keep giving people reasons to feel good about this Ohio State football season, but, there's another one. Throw another one on the pile.
Last thing for me, Jim Knowles was asked if it's an advantage for him that he got to see how Notre Dame's offense attacked his Oklahoma State defense last year in the bowl game. Of course, he was gone, but the defense didn't necessarily change. And so is it more of an advantage for him, or is it more of an advantage for Notre Dame to have gotten to play against that defense? And his quote was, "I don't know about advantage, but it helps me to see how a team responds to the defense." Tom, isn't that an advantage?
It feels like it's like, well, I wouldn't say he's tall, but his height is very significant. Like, it's like you don't want to say that that's an advantage, but also, I think, for him, this is just, you kind of skip the first move or two on the chess, of the chess match between we're going to do this, and then they're going to do that, and then they're going to answer with this, and then we're going to answer with that. You're kind of just moving down the line a little bit there. And, you would think he would have a little bit of an advantage because, not only has he seen what they're going to do against his style of defense, now he's got, different players. I'll just say better players. No offense to Oklahoma State, but we can all read, the AP standings. It's fine. You've got better players, and so now you probably can do a few more different things that you couldn't do at Oklahoma State, and you've sort of seen what they're inclined to do with not exactly the same personnel. You got different players at a bunch of positions on offense, but broadly the same personnel. It feels like it's almost certainly got to be an advantage for Jim Knowles, and with as much as people talk about him being such a teacher, but also just, such a deep thinker and just, so cerebral about the game of football, it feels like, okay, you've had 9 months to break down what they did against basically your defense. That feels like he's probably spent a little time on that, and probably has had time to think up a new thing or two, a new twist or two, to run with his new defense.
But now Notre Dame knows he knows. And so what do they do to counter that? And then, Tom, what does he do to counter what they counter?
Well, that's a good question to ask Ross Fulton, which is someone who I am not, but I will probably have him on the morning show at some point to talk about that. One other thing that I thought was interesting was he was, when Knowles was talking about, one of his quotes was, "We're further than I thought we would be." Just with the defense right now. And he said one of the ways that he knew that was they were creating competitive situations against, what is broadly considered the best offense in the country. So, creating competitive situations does not mean, they haven't had a first down all fall camp. Boy, are they getting their butts whooped. But if you're sort of holding your own with an offense that is, considered probably the best in the country, and if not, one of the 2 best or 3 best in the country, that tells you kind of what this defense can be. If you are holding the Ohio State offense to 28 points a game, like, well, you're really doing something. That is a pretty impressive thing. And if they're kind of going punch for punch with the Ohio State offense, that feels like there is a reason that he's feeling good about things, and it is not just being a sunshine pumper.
Yeah, one of the things Jim Knowles talked about was he and CJ Stroud. Stroud talks to him, asks him questions about the defense, and just wants to know more about like the where to go and how to attack it. And one of the quotes that Knowles said about him is like, "I don't think he makes mistakes." Called him a superior, top-of-the-line quarterback, probably the best he's ever been around in diagnosing what a defense is going to do. He compared him to Eli Manning, who he coached with at Ole Miss, I guess.
Ole Miss, 2003.
Yeah. And then, but defenses back then weren't like defenses now. So what CJ Stroud is able to do now is more impressive. So it's there's a fan of CJ Stroud in that Ohio State defensive room and Jim Knowles, and it's just I'm sure they enjoy the competition, and then afterwards they talk about it, try to get each other better. And I think that's pretty cool. Anything else, Tom, that you wanted to touch on before we go?
I think we've covered it all, but if we haven't covered something, Kevin Noon and I have had talked about some different angles to some of the stuff that we some of the stuff we talked about today, but several other angles to things that we heard from Ryan Day, things we heard from Jim Knowles. Went into a lot more detail on the Eli Manning story. You can find all of that in the Buckeyes Tomorrow Morning feed, wherever you find this. And if you're on YouTube, you can find it on the same YouTube channel. And if you're subscribed to our YouTube channel, you've probably already gotten notified about it. But if you are not subscribed to this on your podcast platform of choice, make sure you subscribe to Buckeyes Tomorrow Morning, Big Me Kickoff, Buckeye Weekly, and then, of course, on YouTube, subscribe to our channel. Leave us a thumbs up on all these videos that help other folks find them through that magical YouTube algorithm.
And there will be more podcasts coming, new podcasts that we're excited about, and we'll be telling you about those later on down the road as well. So that will do it. A reminder, please check out BuckeyeHuddle.com. Take a look, become a member, give it a month, see what you think about it. Hit us up there, interact, see what you... see how that, see how it treats you, see how it feels for you. And I think you'll like what you find there. So give it a go. And thank you all for tuning in, and we'll talk to you later.